So what peasants is, you cannot say it's below 10 hectares. No, that's not possible. But it's really about working with the nature and with the animals, with everything. And the collective part of it is also very important. You can never be a peasant alone. It's about collective creation and never something individualistic. And that's the reason why most of the peasants' rights are collective rights and not so much individual rights. Because, it's about doing this together.
Welcome to the Australian Agroecology Radio Hour, your monthly podcast that explores the issues of food sovereignty in the Australian landscape. I'm your host, Lucy Ridge, speaking to you from the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. Today's episode takes us on a deep dive into the global context of the food sovereignty movement, from the formation of Via Campesina, LVC, the need for international solidarity, and how AFSA fits into that global puzzle. Our guest today is Morgan Ody, a small-scale farmer in Brittany, France. She's a member of the Peasants Confederation, which is a French peasant organisation, and the general coordinator of Via Campesina, the global peasant movement. So welcome, Morgan Ody. You've been the general coordinator for several years now at Via Campesina. I wondered, can you give us a brief introduction to what LVC is and the factors that led to its creation and where it's heading now?
Hello. So indeed, I'm a farmer myself, and I am the general coordinator for Via Campesina at the international level. Via Campesina is the global peasant movement. Via Campesina gathers peasants organizations of small-scale farmers, of farm workers, of rural women, rural youth all over the world. So there are 180 organizations which are members of Via Campesina, and all in all, we gather around 200 million people all around the world. And we are organized in 10 regions. So from Southeast Asia to Africa, to Europe, to Northern America, and also in the Middle East and Northern Africa. So really, we have members of organizations all over the world. And Via Campesina has been created in the early 90s, very much against the economic globalization. It was very much against the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the policies that they were imposing on rural areas to push the production towards export-oriented production instead of supporting small-scale farmers who were producing the food. And so there was this idea in the 90s that in order to achieve food security, you needed to produce food as cheap as possible. And for that, you needed to get the comparative advantages to produce the food where it was the cheapest and to push the agricultural prices really, really down. But what we said in the 90s is that it would never work, because actually hunger is a question of poverty. It's because we are poor that we are hungry. And already in the 90s and still today, the poorest people in the world are the rural workers. They are the farm workers. They are the peasants. And for these reasons, if you push the peasants to be even more poor by turning down the agricultural prices, you don't solve the issue, you make it worse. And this is what happened. Actually, the level of hunger in the world is not decreasing, it's increasing again. And it's because of the poverty, because of the wars, and because of the climate crisis. So economic globalization makes this worse, doesn't make it any better.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as well as the beginnings of Via Campesina, I wondered if you could share how you came to this movement and what your background is.
So I grew up on a small dairy farm in the west of France, and my father was already in the peasant union in France. It's really part of my personal history. And then I went to study. I had first jobs. But I was always interested into internationalism. I traveled to Indonesia. I spent a year in Indonesia, and I met the people who were part of the Indonesian peasant movement, which is really a very interesting movement. And so after a while, I thought, okay, this is where what I should do. So I decided to become myself a small-scale farmer. So I produce vegetables. I have a farm of 1.3 hectare. I sell to a local market and to an association of consumers. And for me, it was very natural to be part of the Peasant Union, because I see the fact to be a small-scale farmer, to produce food as a way to change the world, which is accessible for me. But at the same time, I know that it's not enough. I mean, I know just by producing organic vegetables, I will not change the world. So I need to do that. But at the same time, I need to be part of a global movement which has the capacity to make a difference in terms of challenging the World Trade Organization, in terms of pushing for agrarian reforms all over the world, in terms of pushing for agroecology, in terms of getting a UN declaration for peasants' rights. These kinds of things we can achieve only if we have big movements all over the world. So that's the reason why I'm trying to do the best and to do both. And I think that it's also the reason why so many young people are joining the peasants' organizations, because it's very concrete. In our daily life, we are doing good things that make sense, but also we are part of a big movement that can make big change happen.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you've spoken about people all over the world and young people and the importance of women in rural areas and the work that they do. So La Via Campesina is a really diverse movement. Why is diversity so important in movement building, do you think?
Yeah, we say it's a unity in diversity. Well, first, because the world is diverse. I mean, between peasants in France, pastoralist people in Mali, indigenous people in Peru, and small-scale farmers in India, we are very diverse. But at the same time, there are so many things unifying us. In the sense, everybody needs to eat. The principle for how we grow food all over the world are the same. We need water, we need air, we need land. So I think that it's really giving a very nice image of the fact that as humans all over the world, we are all equals.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this can encompass a huge diversity of cultures, of a way of singing, of a way of cooking food, and that is beautiful. And we want to keep that great diversity, which is making the world beautiful.
Absolutely. We wanted to ask you a little bit about the use of the word peasant, because in the international space, the word peasant is used quite widely. And, indeed, La Via Campesina is the way of the peasant. And you spoke earlier about the Peasants Union in France. But there's been a little bit of pushback we found in Australia, with people being a bit hesitant to call themselves peasants or not really understanding why it was important to do that. So, Morgan, I wondered if you could give us a definition of peasant, please.
A peasant is someone who takes care of the land and who works with the land, with the water, with the animal to produce what the family, the community needs to make a living. So this is food, but also very often some material for accommodation or for all the needs that we have. So it's about working with the nature to produce what we need for the livelihood, I think.
Yeah, and it's about on a small scale rather than, broad acre commodity farming, right?
It's very diverse. I mean, if you are in a very desertic area, it can be about pastoralist people. They travel through huge areas to feed the animals, and I mean, in other places with a quarter of hectare of rice fields, for example, you can already produce a lot. So what peasants is, you cannot say it's below 10 hectares. No, that's not possible. But it's really about working with the nature and with the animals, with everything. And the collective part of it is also very important. You can never be a peasant alone. you always, in order to be a peasant and to produce the food and the other thing that you need, you always need to work with the others, with your neighbors and the community, but also with animals, but also with your land, so it's about collective creation and never something individualistic. And that's the reason why most of the peasants' rights are collective rights and not so much individual rights. Because, it's about doing this together. And for this, in all peasants' societies, communities, the values around helping each other, solidarity are very important.
I wondered if you had some thoughts about why it's important for farmers to self-identify as peasants and why that specific language is important.
Well, it's political to call ourselves peasants. And I can talk about my own organization. So my organization is called Peasants Confederation. So we use the term peasant. And it was political to decide to do so. In the 80s, when they created the organization, the normal term was also farmer, or in French, agriculteur. And even the administration was pushing for another terminology, which was around agricultural exploitation. So, which is like extractivism. And what we say at that moment is that we are not an extractivist industry. We are something else, which has to do with taking care of the land, taking care of the territories, taking care of our neighbors, of the animals, and that's what peasants are about. So for us, that was a political move to decide to call ourselves peasants and a peasant union. And in the beginning, it was not so easy, but with the years, now in the media, even the Minister of Agriculture will say, the peasants think this or think that. So finally, it comes into the general language. And language is always political.
Yeah.
And I think that we should fight for language. We should fight for all words. Because there is a will to turn everything into technicality, into something very, very cold, and that does not take into account the relation of care, the love that we have for each other, and that makes just as if this does not exist. But this is the key. I mean, the fertility, it's not only about physics. It's also about a kind of relation which is about energy and which we understand very little about. And I think that as peasants, just like as indigenous people, I think we do understand that it's not only about physics, that there is life, and life is about something more than physics.
Yeah.
For us, it's important. We know that in English-speaking countries, in the UK or in Ireland, they have the same kind of questions, also because it relates to old-time peasantry.
Yeah.
But this is also something which we believe is beautiful. This year in Europe, we are commemorating 500 years after the German Peasant War, which took place in 1525. And that was one of the main people's uprising in Europe at the moment when they were creating capitalism, at the moment when Europe just started to colonize the Americas. And in front of that, European peasants did a huge uprising.
Wow.
This is very little known, but it's about our history. And if you look at their demands at that moment, because also it was the beginning of the industry of printing. So some peasants started to be able to write and read. And so we have their demands written. And this is a kind of first human rights declaration. And what they are calling for, they are calling for freedom. They are calling for equality. So I think as Via Campesina, we are still rooted in these movements, demanding equality, demanding freedom, demanding the access to the commons, all those values. We're still the same, and we are still fighting for the same. So for this reason as well, I find it very inspiring to call ourselves peasants, just like peasants were calling themselves peasants 500 years ago.
Yeah, wow. Oh, that's so interesting. I think that's a part of European history that, you're right, isn't very well known. So it's so important to be able to root ourselves in that history and take inspiration from them, I guess. Yeah, wow. You mentioned earlier the United Nations declarations on the... Sorry, I'm going to start that again. You mentioned earlier the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and Other People Working in Rural Areas, which we call UNDROP. And this was a really important declaration that Via Campesina had a lot to do with. So I wondered if you could talk us through a little bit about how you made that happen as an organisation.
So it really started with the Indonesian peasant organization because they were facing huge human rights violations, very much linked to agrarian conflicts. So big companies would arrive on the territories, they would push away the peasants to take the land and killing people or burning the houses of people. And so after the dictatorship of Suharto, the peasant movement really had a blooming time, and peasants could go back on their land, reclaim their land again, but there were still many conflicts. And so for the organization in Indonesia, it was really important to say that as peasants, we are human beings, we have human rights. And so they say that there are, it's just like the woman's right. We are part of the humanity, so it's part of human rights.
Yeah.
But because we face specific discriminations, we don't need a UN declaration to recognize our rights because we are facing specific discrimination. So this is the same for peasants. Actually, all the rights which are in the Peasants' Rights Declaration are human rights. They are also recognized in the Universal Human Rights declarations. But we need a specific declaration to make it clear that as peasants, the right to land, the right to water, the right to political participation, the right to move from one place to another, the right to live in a safe territory, or like in a territory which is not intoxicated with toxic products. All these are human rights and should be implemented. And so they convinced Via Campesina movement to go for it. And then we started a very long work in Geneva in the UN Human Rights Council to find countries that would support that. And Bolivia played a key role. And Bolivia really supported that process towards the UN Declaration for the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural area. And then we found other allied countries on the way, most of them being countries from the global south who understand very well what means the specific discriminations against peasants. And so after a very long process of 18 years, there was a vote in the UN General Assembly, and it was positive. Most of the countries agreed to have this UNDRAP. And something that is important to be said is that even in countries like Australia, which did not vote in favor.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually.
Yeah. So actually, it's not because Australia did not vote in favor of UNDRAP that the UNDRAP cannot be implemented in Australia. On the contrary, the UNDRAP has been voted by the majority of the UN General Assembly. So it's for everywhere.
Yeah. In
countries that voted in favor, but also in countries that voted against. And we see some moves. Like, for example, in Europe, most of the countries abstained. But in 2023, we had a new vote to create a new working group to work on the implementation of peasants' rights all over the world. And then we saw some countries like Spain or Germany or Belgium, which had abstained in 2008. Now they voted in 2018. And 5 years later, they voted in favor. So we also see that it's like the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People. It takes some time for countries to accept that it's there and that they should work with it. Yeah. So let's hope that it's going to be the same with Australia as well.
Yes, we very much hope so. Absolutely. So I wondered, what are some of the biggest learnings that you've had from working with Via Campesina and from your work? And how do you think that we might be able to apply that in an Australian context?
For me, the biggest learning, it's about this very simple, basic principle that every human beings are equal. And I think we all know this. But I mean, it's not so clear and it's not so much told in our everyday life.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege to go to Haiti 2 years ago. And in Haiti, really, every day, everybody says this sentence which says, tout le monde c'est monde. Every person is a person.
Wow.
And really, you hear that several times a day. And I found that fantastic.
Yeah.
That for children, for everybody, for all of us, yeah, every person is a person. That is the basic knowledge that we should all have. And I think that this is what we are defending as La Via Campesina. It's not only about food sovereignty, agroecology. It's about every person is a person, and even if we are poor, marginalized, if we are a woman, if we are gay, if we are black, we are all human. We are all just the same. We are all as stupid as it should, how we say, as smart and as stupid.
Yeah.
And that is an important lesson, because that has been the claim for social movements in the whole history, the claim for equality, the claim to refuse that some people, just because they are white or because they are rich or because they are men, they pretend to have the right to dominate and to oppress other people. No, we refuse that. And so I think that it's very strong that a movement of peasants, and we are most of the time among the poorest people in the population, we unite all over the world for this value of every person is a person, and we do have human rights, and we do not want to be oppressed. We want to be considered as equal in the societies. And it's not only a big principle. I mean, in our everyday life, we are fighting for peasant feminism, for example, to stop the oppression of men against women. So it materializes in very concrete struggles. In Via Campesina, we have created an articulation of diversities to ensure that people who are LGBTQI in the rural area, in particular, that they stop facing massive violence just because they are gay or trans. Because we consider that every human person is a human being, and that everybody should be respected. So I think that this principle, linked with very concrete actions, it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so necessary at the moment in a world where so often every person is not treated like a person.
Exactly. I mean, this is what the far right is about, but also the right wing. This is all what it's about for a very long time, actually. And that's what we learn when we learn about peasants, the history of peasant struggle in the world, or of indigenous people struggles in the world. It's always about equality, always about refusing that some people, just because they come from Europe, or because they are white, or because they are men, or because they are rich, they feel the right to oppress other people. And we are right now in a moment where I think over the last 50 years, there was some progress. I mean, the fact that in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was voted in the UN.
Yes.
It's important, and we should not deny the importance of such things, because, I mean, before that, with colonialism and all those things, it would never have been possible. So suddenly in 1948, the countries, they accept this statement, but it's never been implemented. I mean, we are still in a situation where colonialism, neocolonialism, white supremacism, the fact that if you are rich, you have access to medical services, and if you are poor, you don't have access to medical services. All these things, it's a daily struggle. And I think that, like, in the last decades, there was a lot of hypocrisy and pretendingly we were all the same, but the reality was still that if the US was deciding something and Senegal would not agree, well, the US would continue, and pretendingly to kill civilians was not okay. But when the US put bombs in Iraq and killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, well, nobody said nothing. And so I feel that now we are at a moment of proof, in a sense.
Yeah.
Because of environmental crisis, because we now all know that we have only one Earth and that the resources are limited. And so the rich people cannot pretend anymore that if they become richer, the poor people will get some of this wealth. We all know that there is only one cake and we need to share it.
Yeah.
So now the only way for the privileged to maintain their privileges or to increase their privileges is to take resources and wealth out of the poorest people. And this is what we are facing right now. It's very clear now in order to continue to get richer, the billionaires, the rich people in this world are ready to do genocide. I mean, what they are doing right now in Palestine, it's about genocide.
Yeah.
And it's about what they are ready to do to any one of us who is not accepting to give up some of our rights for them to continue to be still richer and richer and richer. That is about that. And I think in Via Campesina, because we are a peasant movement, because we've been experiencing oppression, domination for centuries and millenniums, we know what it is about. And we know that in order to struggle against this far right, against these people that believe that they are the kings and we are nothing, in front of that, we need to unify and we need internationalism. And that is what Via Campesina is about. Internationalism from the people from below. So together with trade unions, with fisherfolk people, with indigenous people, we try to unify to propose a vision of hope. And what we say in Via Campesina is globalized struggles, globalized hope. Because we do believe that if we struggle, we can have a better life. We can have food for everybody. We can have housing for everybody. We can have medical care for everybody. But if we don't struggle, it's very clear now. The powerful people, the rich people, they will take it all for them. Yeah. And we will have never enough left for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that idea of globalizing hope is so powerful. In Australia, there's been some statistics about depression and suicide rates in people living in rural areas and people in farming communities. And I think partly it's isolation, and partly it's because, if you're not part of a movement and if you're not part of a community that is doing actively hopeful actions, then it's very easy to feel hopeless. So I think what Via Campesina does to globalize that hope is so powerful and something that often gets missed when we talk about the mental health of farmers in Australia.
Yeah, and I think it's true also in our daily life. I mean, the daily life of peasants or small-scale farmers, it can be tough when we are under the rain. It's cold. Right now in Europe, it's cold and it's raining. But at the same time, I mean, to see the birth of a baby cow or to see the small prawns growing, it's beautiful. So it's tough, but it's also plenty of sense, plenty of beauty, and we know that our work is useful. I mean, producing food is what we need the most, and I do think that in this moment where we are kind of lost all over the world, in particular, I would say in Western countries, people are lost. Yeah, and we do need to have these basic things. Okay, I need to do something that makes sense, that is good for the others. And we need this kind of basic principles. Every person is a person.
Every person is a person.
I think that it's better than big speeches, very intellectual speeches.
Yeah.
Okay, what the Haitian say. Every person is a person, and let's take this as the way to guide our lives. And I feel that in the movements, the people who are in the movements, even if we face repression, but there is happiness, there is joy in this, in the fact that we are making good friends, and we are, because it's nice to know that your friends are good people.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Are struggling for the better, and that are courageous. That are, I mean, when I travel very often, I consider that the peasant leaders that I have the privilege to meet, that they are heroes, real heroes. They struggle for the good things, and very modest heroes. They are not in the newspapers, they are not in the TV shows, but still they are heroes.
So I wondered if you had any advice for farmers, for peasants in Australia. How can they participate in the global food sovereignty movement?
Well, first, I think it's very important. I'm very happy that AFSA is now a member of Via Campesina, because I think that this connection with other peasants' movement in the world, it makes a difference. I mean, sometimes we are in our societies, we listen to the media, and it can make us see the world in a sense that it's propaganda. So the fact that we can have direct connections with other people in other parts of the world, we can just ask them, okay, I heard that in the TV this morning, but what do you think about it? Because you are in this country, so tell me, how is it really for you? And I think that this is important because the information, it's currently a weapon for the powerful people, a weapon of propaganda. And in front of that, the fact to keep direct connections among workers, among peasants ourselves, and to ask, okay, how is it? And to understand that there is complexity, that it's not very often. It's not as it's not what we hear in the media. And I'm saying this also, France is still a very colonial country. So what we hear about Western Africa, it's very much connected to this neocolonialism. And the fact to be able to discuss directly with small-scale farmers in Western Africa, I get a completely different sense of what is going on there. And it's very helpful. And I think that, so that would be an advice to make webinars, to ensure that you have some peasants traveling to other countries, that you also invite peasant delegation to come to Australia so that we know about your reality as well, which is important. That's a first thing. Then I think that it's very important to keep the connection with peoples who face economic difficulties, even if they don't share all your values. Because what we see all over the world, and in particular in Western countries, is that the far right has been extremely smart into capturing the popular vote. And it's important that we don't let this happen, so that we ensure that we keep the connection with our neighbors who are facing big economic difficulties, who are indebted, who are isolated, and that we maintain this very concrete solidarity. That they might be voting for the far right, but why? And I think that very often in the social movements, we are tending to think, oh, if they are voting once for the far right, they are bad. And so we abandon them. And I think that it's really important that we say, okay, actually, there is a sense that the far right is so smart in using the feeling of humiliation of people. But we need to ensure that we give the recognition to these people who are workers, who are, very often working very hard and do not get recognized by this capitalist society for the work that they do. And I think that if we abandon them, it's too easy for the far right to capture their votes and their support. So I think it's our task to not keep being with the people from the middle class, from the cities, with the scholar, but to ensure that we a strong connection with our neighbors who are facing this economic oppression. That's not easy. It's not easy because it's so much easier among ourselves than to have difficult conversation with our neighbors who might be racist, who might be homophobic, and all those things. But at the same time, I think that if we are not doing so, we are not giving us the chance to really build strong popular social movements that can make a difference in our societies.
Yeah, you can really empower people through those relationships. Wow, that's excellent stuff. And already I've got so many thoughts pinging out of my mind, and I'm sure that other people do as well. Before we wrap up, I thought I would just ask you if there's anything else that Via Campesina is doing right now that you'd like to share with us.
Oh, wow. There are so many things. Well, I think in this moment, exactly, we are very much concerned with the situation in Palestine. Well, we have been over the last month, obviously, with the situation in Gaza, but now the statements that Trump is doing against the Palestinian people, it's making us very much concerned. And we think that it's not only about Palestine. What's going on in Palestine It's about the project that these oligarchies, the billionaires, that they are for the people in the world, actually, in particular in the global south, but also for the working class in the northern countries. So we think that it's a matter of struggling for humanity, for dignity, to support the Palestinian people, and to say very clearly, there is no way that you erase Palestine. There is no way.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult, because when saying this in Western Europe and probably in Australia, you face a lot of repression. But we should keep saying this. It's basically, they are human rights, the Palestinian people. They have been living there. They have been farming there. They have been taking care of these territories for centuries. There is no way that they are pushed away from their country to install a touristic area for the people.
Yeah.
No, we will not let it go like this, and we will mobilize all over the world to support them, because their struggle, the struggle of Palestinian people, this is a struggle for humanity. This is a struggle for equality and for human dignity.
Yeah, exactly. Because all people are people, and all Palestinian people are people. So their struggle is our struggle.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Morgan. It's been an absolute delight having you with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
We've invited AFSA's focal point for farmers, Tammi Jonas, onto the pod for a quick update on AFSA's current Abattoir campaign. Welcome, Tammi.
Thanks, Lucy. Good to be here.
So what's going on with abattoirs in Australia right now?
Well, there's the bigger picture that multinationals are taking over most of them, and small and medium-scale livestock farmers are losing access to them at an increasingly rapid rate. It's been going on for more than a decade, but this last year we've seen probably a dozen abattoirs foreclose access to smallholders.
So what's AFSA doing to help in this climate?
So we've been advocating for reforms to allow it to make it easier to build micro abattoirs and to protect kind of smallholder access to the bigger abattoirs for several years. I think in Victoria specifically, where we've been the most active, we've put in proposed reforms for about 7 years, repeatedly to Minister after Minister for Agriculture. And we were delighted in early December, to see the report on the inquiry into securing the Victorian food supply include a recommendation that had our proposed reforms about micro abattoirs. So defining them in the Meat Industry Act and then making them easier to get a planning permit, essentially. And like the next day, Hardwicks, which is owned by Kilcoy, a big multinational meatpacking firm, they told all the smallholders in my region that we are no longer going to be welcome there. As of, at the time they said the 1st of January, we managed to get them to make it the 1st of Feb. So now we don't have any access. That came off the back of, in October of last year, DBC, which is an abattoir in southwestern WA, had a similar story where they had told smallholders there that they were no longer going to take small lots for service kills. We managed to, in that case, advocate to both the WA government and to DBC, the board themselves. It's not a multinational, it's an Australian-owned, vertically integrated company. Now majority owned by West Pork, which is vertically integrated pork production. We had written to all of them and convinced them to stay, give access until mid-Feb. And so that was more successful than we had with Hardwicks, actually. But because of that, and then actually in January, Tammin Abattoir, another one in WA, foreclosed access, and 3 more in New South Wales in that same period of time have done the same. And so...
Yeah. So it's been a problem for a long time, but it's really kind of rapidly
Absolutely. And so with the acceleration, we went, okay, it's time to do more than just submit quiet reform ideas every now and again to the ministers. So we launched a campaign. We wrote a campaign strategy. We contacted all of our allies across the movement and we said, let's go. We wrote a petition for Victoria. Our comrades in Sprout, Tasmania, the growers group in Tassie, already had a petition on the go about abattoirs. And so those things really helped us get more attention in the ABC and some of the other local media. And And we submitted our petition to Victoria yesterday with nearly 3,000 signatures on it. They were like the MP who supported it, Martha Haylett, was really pleased with the response that we'd had to those signatures. Being in Parliament was pretty interesting because we were definitely not pariahs. You know, they were like ministers and MPs were coming up to talk to us to say, how's it all going?
Yeah, wow.
You know, you have to resist saying, well, we're hanging in there, but you could really help make it better. Well, no, we did say that. We didn't resist saying that at all. We said exactly that. And then we've got meetings we sent letters to ministers in every single state, actually. And so we now have had meetings with some of the states and some of the shadow ministers. Some other MPs in those states have also shown interest in talking with us. So it's still amping up. But we're and WA, I should say, WA, not only did DBC give them till mid-Feb, they recently backflipped entirely and have said they're going to continue doing small lots of service kills. And it's kind of a mystery why, but it may have to do with the live export ban that's coming up over there for sheep. And we think they might have done a deal for some grant money for the transition from the government if they would remain open to smallholders. And we'll take it. If that's what it is for now, we'll take it.
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot going on all over
There's
the
a lot
country.
going on.
So how can farmers and eaters and anyone else in the food system get involved with this campaign?
So one of the main things is to keep raising awareness about it, particularly to MPs, because we have stated demands that are all on the AFSA website. So the reforms, which are pretty technical if you're not a planning nerd like farmer activists tend to be. So those things are there, and there's templates for writing to your local members. So making sure everybody's local members know that this is an issue for everybody who eats. You know, the focus on export has come to its logical conclusion, where soon we will not be able to process any livestock that is produced here in Australia for Australians. That's the direction it's going if they don't get into gear. So local members, letters, sharing these things on social media, joining AFSA, obviously, because it's, I like to say, I don't like to say, but I do say, if they have the money, we have the numbers, but we don't have the numbers unless they're signed up numbers. You know, governments don't listen to the fact that, oh, but we have like 6,000 people who like us on Facebook. You know, what they want to know is how many members do you have? And the more members we have, the more powerful our voice is.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Tammi, for coming in and giving us an update.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Agroecology Radio Hour. If you'd like to support AFSA's work, please head to our website, afsa.org.au, where you can become a member or follow the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance on social media. You can also sign up as a subscriber to this podcast on buymeacoffee.com and contact us via our email address, australian.food.sovereignty@gmail.com. Thanks to our producer, Ivan Blackett, and our guests, Morgan Ody and Tammi Jonas. We'll put relevant links in the show notes if you'd like to know more about Morgan's work with Via Campesina and the Abattoir campaign with AFSA. And of course, please share this podcast with your networks to help grow the food sovereignty movement in Australia and beyond. Viva!